The man was arrested simultaneously by the FBI and the Anti-Weapons Bureau. Without any formal procedures, he was taken straight to the chief prosecutor, who immediately ordered his execution. Facing public outrage, the chief prosecutor swore he would make the man cry before leaving the room. But the next second, Mrs. Polita, the wife of Governor Clinton, called. Berry then walked out arrogantly, claiming he would buy everyone present a sports car for wasting their time, because he would be acquitted right away. Everyone mocked him, but soon fell silent when the chief prosecutor truly ordered his release. Berry looked arrogant, but in reality, he had no power at all. He used to be just an airline pilot. With a good salary and a bit of Brazilian goods smuggling, life was stable. Until one day at a bar, a man named Saar suddenly approached him. This man not only knew Berry's name but also his cigar smuggling activities. Berry felt uneasy as Saar loudly claimed they were planning a revolution in Central America and would establish a new nation, and that Berry's flying skills were exactly what they needed. Berry asked if he was from the C agency. He laughed, knowing the CIA was famously generous. Sure enough, in the hangar sat a brand new twin-engine jet that Berry couldn't take his eyes off. The only strange thing was a modified camera mounted on the plane's belly. Saar explained it was for intelligence gathering. In 1978, the Cold War was at its peak. The Soviet Union supported Nicaragua's democratic revolution, so Berry's mission was to photograph their armed forces to prove their aggressive actions. This type of mission was completely covert. If caught, the CIA would deny everything and offer no help. It wasn't a good job, dangerous and poorly paid. But whether from thrill-seeking or pure recklessness, Berry agreed. He then flew over Nicaragua every day, lowering altitude as the armed forces fired at him, capturing photos right above their heads. Thanks to his extensive flying experience, Berry could fly extremely low, producing high-quality photos that impressed the CIA. But the risk was huge. Once, his plane was hit and nearly went down. He survived only because one engine was still running. With skill and luck, he made it out alive. Feeling no one could do the job better, and with a newborn at home, Berry asked Saar for a raise. Instead of increasing his pay, Saar assigned him a new task: deliver cash to a colonel in Panama and bring back intel. The mission wasn't dangerous, but it required refueling in Colombia. That one small detour changed his fate. While refueling, a jeep suddenly appeared and took him to a bearded man. Berry thought they had the wrong person, but the man called his name and even knew he worked for the CIA and flew there weekly. Their request was simple: take some goods back to the U.S. Berry didn't understand until they brought him to a plantation. They wanted him to transport contraband directly to Miami. They offered $2,000 per kilo, a fortune in 1980. The runway was short and risky, but Berry knew he could handle it. The problem, they relied on his supposed CIA status, unaware he had no official ties and still underwent regular checks. Their plan was impossible, but Berry had a better one. He marked a drop point on a U.S. map and told the bearded man's people to wait there. He loaded 300 kilograms onto his plane, took off, switched to autopilot, then tossed the cargo out in life vest bundles. He cleaned the cabin thoroughly, knowing sniffer dogs would check the plane upon landing. At the drop point, Berry switched on autopilot, went to the back, and dumped all the cargo wrapped in life vests. Then he disinfected the cabin, knowing sniffer dogs would inspect the plane after landing. Everything went exactly as planned. He made $600,000, the bearded man's crew made even more, and they could repeat this every week. But just as they were planning the next run, police surrounded the mansion and arrested everyone. The powerful traffickers walked free the next day, leaving Berry behind. Luckily, Safer showed up, but with bad news. He asked if Berry had seen the men who were released. Berry guessed they might know he worked for the CIA, but Safer coldly denied it. Berry wasn't CIA at all, just a smuggler. Worse, Louisiana police already knew about his arrest. At 6 a.m. the next morning, they would raid his home and take his wife for questioning, maybe even keep her overnight. Berry panicked. That was exactly what Safer wanted. He offered a way out, but only if Berry agreed to his terms. With no choice, Berry accepted. Safer then told him they had to move immediately. The police raid wouldn't be stopped. The CIA had already prepared a new safe house. Berry rushed home, woke his sleeping wife, packed everything, and fled that night. The new town was peaceful, and the CIA house was nice, just empty. His wife stood stunned, overwhelmed by how fast their life had changed. Then Berry saw Safer waiting outside, meaning a new mission. Berry followed him, unaware his wife saw everything. At the hangar, Berry found his old plane and several large crates. Inside were brand new AK-47s. The rebel group he once photographed had successfully overthrown Nicaragua's government. President Reagan refused to tolerate a communist state at America's doorstep and wanted to support the local opposition. But Congress blocked the plan, fearing another Vietnam. Reagan didn't give up, he turned to the CIA. And the CIA turned to Barry. They ordered Barry to use his plane to deliver weapons to the rebels. If he refused, he'd be sent back to a Colombian prison. Safer knew Barry had no choice, so he handed him a map showing the positions of all law enforcement units around the Gulf of Mexico, Customs, DA, ATF, along with safe flight paths to avoid them. Barry was overwhelmed, but then he spotted a backpack on the plane, the same one the Colombian police should have confiscated, filled with the $600,000 commission he'd been paid. That made him realize his arrest in Colombia was likely staged by the CIA. But the backpack being returned clearly meant the CIA approved him working with the bearded trafficker again. He happily brought the money home only to be greeted by his furious wife. After being dragged out of bed, moved to a strange town, and seeing her husband sneaking around with injuries on his face, her fear was understandable. She thought he'd committed a crime and was about to go to jail. Barry explained he'd quit his job, got a new one, and tossed her the backpack full of cash. Shocked but convinced, she calmed down. Barry then started his new missions. But on his very first weapons delivery, the rebels robbed him clean, even taking his shoes. The second time he prepared decoy crates, but it didn't help, they still stole everything. Luckily, he was saved by a familiar face, the bearded Colombian trafficker, accompanied by the American officer overseeing the rebels. They wanted to discuss a new business plan. They designed a new route. Barry would fly guns directly to Colombia, then the traffickers would move products from Colombia to the rebel camp, and the rebels would ship the goods to Miami by fishing boats. Barry thought it all sounded absurd, but that wasn't his problem, and he had no reason to refuse. After striking the deal, Barry went straight to work, though with one twist. Every time he returned to the US, his plane would be loaded with goods, which he'd drop mid-air just like before. Flying home empty would be a waste. The new route was more complicated, but no one seemed to notice. Everything ran smoothly, and money poured in. Seeing one plane wasn't enough, Barry hired 4 helpers. Soon 5 aircraft were flying non-stop, and his income skyrocketed. But because all the weapons he flew ended up in the hands of the drug lord, the rebels kept losing battles. With the American handler covering it up, the CIA assumed it was simply poor combat training. So Sauer met Barry again, ordering him to fly rebel fighters to the US for training. Even though this meant pausing drug shipments, Barry had no choice but to obey. Meanwhile, Sauer was thrilled, weapons out, men in, he thought a promotion was coming. But Barry had bigger problems, too much money. After a few years, he owned 40 aircraft. His earnings grew insane. Local banks held tens of millions for him, one even reserved its main vault just for Barry, pushing other customers' cash into a small side room. He also ran multiple shell companies for laundering. His once small home had become a mansion, yet even that couldn't contain the cash. Closets overflowed, shoes went missing under piles of bills, and the yard was full of money buried underground. Even Barry no longer knew how rich he was. But money makes people arrogant and blinds them to hidden risks. Barry didn't realize he was being watched. The FBI detected abnormal large-scale cash flow, and after investigating, they traced it back to Barry. Meanwhile, Customs had repeatedly spotted his transport planes. Although they couldn't catch him in the act, the small clues eventually led them straight to him. Still, they didn't want to alert him, they intended to investigate everything thoroughly before making arrests. Barry had no idea and kept working as usual. Just as he left home, his not-so-bright brother-in-law caused a huge mess. The guy stole Barry's suitcase full of cash and flaunted it around town right in front of a cop who had been tracking Barry for a long time. Meanwhile, Barry was chased by Border Patrol on his way back. He couldn't drop the shipment at the planned spot and had to fly straight to the town's airport, still unable to shake off the pursuit. In desperation, he made an emergency landing. Unable to return home, he called the bearded man for help. But before Barry could say a word, the man delivered bad news. The enemy had attacked his base in Colombia, seized weapons, and he was now declaring war on the government. Even worse, he demanded Barry transport another 1,500 kilograms of goods. Luckily, that day wasn't only bad news. When Saffer learned what happened, he was furious but temporarily covered the situation. So Barry decided to deal with his brother-in-law first. But the bearded man wouldn't let it go, insisting he would handle it, and Barry only needed to focus on the shipment. Ignoring him, Barry went to the police station to bail the guy out. He told him to go far away and never contact him again. But some people don't understand the danger. The brother-in-law even yelled at Barry, threatened to send his address, and demanded regular payments. Before he could, the car exploded. That was the bearded man's idea of handling it. He pushed his brother-in-law's car off the cliff. Then he returned to the airport and saw a large convoy of military trucks heading out. Saffer was there as well. He explained that all the trained recruits had to be sent back because the fighters they trained never returned to the front line, and the supplied weapons never reached them. Instead, those weapons were showing up in Colombia. Barry realized his actions had been exposed. Right at that moment, the pager on his waist buzzed. He didn't dare check it, and Saffer didn't ask. They both knew it was a message from the bearded man. Barry didn't dare look at it in front of Saffer, and Saffer himself had more urgent matters. At the same time, Saffer urgently ordered his team to follow protocol and burn everything using incineration bags to destroy all documents related to Barry. Anything that could tie the agency to these operations had to be erased. Barry realized the CIA had officially abandoned him and was wiping out all evidence. So he ordered his men to move all the proof out of the airport. But there was simply too much. Even by nightfall, countless things still hadn't been removed. Meanwhile, Saffer's cleanup was far easier. In this race against time, Barry had lost. Something unprecedented happened. Barry was arrested by 4 different agencies at the same time. He was brought before the Attorney General, who absolutely hated this gun-running, money-laundering smuggler and wanted to make his life a living hell. But a single phone call from the governor pulled Barry out of danger. He thought Saffer had stepped in to protect him and cover up the CIA's shady operations, but the person escorting him said they had never even heard of Saffer, leaving Barry completely confused. He was taken to a White House. There, he had no right to speak, only to watch as a military officer and a politician argued. It turned out the anti-drug unit wanted to destroy the bearded man's cartel once and for all, while the military wanted proof that Soviet-backed Nicaragua was smuggling weapons into the U.S. The reason they needed Barry was to fly the old route again and take photographic evidence, allowing both sides to achieve their goals. To do that, Barry was the key. Faced with a chance to survive, he obviously couldn't refuse. He returned to Nicaragua, used the camera they had installed, and captured clear photos of the bearded man, his men, and the rebel forces. Not long after, the president appeared on TV condemning Colombian gunrunners colluding with Nicaragua to smuggle weapons into the U.S. But to Barry's shock, his own face was broadcast clearly on television. He realized he had been set up. As expected, the FBI quickly arrived to search his home. But what Barry truly feared wasn't the FBI, it was the bearded man's revenge. His brother-in-law's death was still fresh in his mind. Now that the bearded man knew he had been betrayed, he would never let Barry live. So Barry sent his wife and children far away for safety, then returned alone to face the court. Before the court, Barry was unexpectedly given a very light sentence, 1,000 hours of community service. The verdict was so absurd that even he couldn't help but blurt out how ridiculous it was. After that, he moved between different hotels every single day, never daring to stay in the same place for more than one night. At the same time, he recorded videos daily, recounting everything that had happened in the past. He hoped these recordings would serve as evidence, something that could make the bearded man think twice, or scare Saffer into protecting him. Whenever he started his car, he even warned people nearby to step back, afraid that turning the key might trigger an explosion. But he had no idea that thanks to Saffer cutting ties in time and destroying all documents related to him, Saffer avoided any consequences. In fact, Saffer was even promoted for his proposal to support Iran. And then what had to come finally came. One day, about a month later, Barry was ambushed in his car. American Made is a fast-paced, darkly comedic crime biopic based on the life of pilot Barry Seal. The film succeeds in portraying the wild highs and lows of a man who became a trafficker of drugs and weapons while working for the CIA in the 1980s. Its strongest point is Tom Cruise's charismatic performance and the film's sharp satire of U.S. foreign policy. The movie exposes the blurry line between government and crime, showing Barry Seal as merely a pawn in a complex political game where money and power overshadow all morality. It's a shocking, highly entertaining story and at the same time a deep critique of the darker side of the American dream. A film's value lies in its reputation, a review's value lies in its feeling. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching. What do you think of this movie? Leave your comments below.